And we're back with the show. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here at the Pop Culture Cosmos. Want to thank you so much for listening and watching. We truly appreciate it. Got my good friend here from Hunnikween. He is the man indeed. You got to check out what he's doing today at Hunnikween on Facebook and also the Hunnick Outcast. It is a man who has saved us more times here at Pop Culture Cosmos than I can count. But he's here today to talk about Christmas horror stories and also remember the life of someone who recently passed away, who pop culture owes a great bit of debt to, in Tommy Lister. And so we want to go ahead and remember him fondly because he truly was a great part of pop culture. It is Noah Ian Fein. And Noah, thanks for coming on today. Some somber signs. I know you and I had talked originally about doing this for Christmas horror stories, and we're going to go ahead and for Christmas horror movies, we'll go ahead and hit that up in a sec. But I wanted first to hear your thoughts on Tommy Tiny Lister because so many people out there know him from the world of wrestling as Zeus when he appeared in the SummerSlam main event with Hulk Hogan. Exactly, you're doing the signs right now. He tried a brief comeback in WWC and Puerto Rico and also WCW as well. But I think also his major performances, obviously in Friday as Devo, as the guy who's going to really just wreck your world if you didn't cooperate, or as well his as the president, which I think is his best performance ever in The Fifth Element, and his way he just captured the screen in a very stirring scene, a very tense scene in A Dark Knight as well.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. And here's the thing. If 2020 couldn't have gotten any more suckier, there's no other way to say it, but it's true, if it doesn't suck any more than it has, I knew we were going to lose some celebrities this year, but boy, oh boy, did we lose a lot of celebrities. I guess it started with Kobe, at least that's as I recall, and now we have, the man who was the manufacturer of Slim Jim. But Zeus, actually, it's an interesting story because when I lived in New York for several years, I was able to go to SummerSlam '89. Can't remember where I sat, and all my memorabilia sadly got lost when I moved to Pennsylvania. But the point is, I got to go to SummerSlam '89, and they had the Zeus, Macho Man Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Brutus Beefcake feud because, again, in March or between March or May, you had No Holds Barred, and the movie did okay. But I have to be honest; it's a cult following. It's definitely one of the more interesting films. But Zeus got swept up quickly for the World Wrestling Federation itself, and unfortunately, because he wasn't trained properly, Vince McMahon just thought that he had the look and the build. Zeus, sadly, when you watched him live, he was huge and he was menacing. But as Bruno Sammartino would say, he didn't know a wristwatch from a wrist lock, and that was a problem. So the problem is when I would see him on TV, when he made his Superstars debut against Brutus Beefcake and then attacking Hogan in Saturday's main event and then seeing him at SummerSlam, you kind of knew that it's a good thing he was teamed up with Savage because Savage was a detail freak. By December, you had the No Holds Barred Christmas where the movie was on pay-per-view, and then you got to watch a match. There was actually a house show with several other matches that I don't really remember too much, but the only thing you saw on this pay-per-view was a cage match with Hogan and Beefcake against Zeus and Savage. Now, if Zeus would have come in a few months later when the movie came out on VHS, and he had some more time to train when the movie was coming out on VHS, and then shown that pay-per-view first, the rumors were he was supposed to show up at WrestleMania 6 against Hogan for the championship. Like, he would come and interfere with matches, but they would have a debut match at WrestleMania 6. Mm-hmm. So that was supposed to be the whole, well, at least that's what Zeus told the public, and, well, again, he just really couldn't wrestle. And I know in '96 he went to WCW for a while, a different name, but he just, he just didn't have. It's hard to explain, but if you get your hands on Something to Wrestle podcast of Bruce Richard, it will explain a little bit more why Zeus wasn't able to follow direction too much either. So it was a couple problems. He was blind in one eye, but still, he just didn't know. Like if Bruce Pritchard as Brother Love would secretly tell Zeus to do things, Zeus didn't know that Bruce Pritchard was talking to Zeus, and that was a problem. But I will say this much: as for the movie, it does have some cult status. It feels like a Rocky Four in the professional wrestling world.
Well, anything remembered, let's put it this way, anything remembered from that era of Hulk Hogan movies is got to be a cult classic at best, because they're not good and they're not really fondly remembered among the general public. All of them you could pretty much throw in a barrel, and they're pretty much all
no,
great watching.
The others, I tried to watch Santa with Muscles, but that's not the point. The point is, as for Zeus goes, I don't really have the best matches because he really wasn't. He was trained too quickly.
He's an actor putting in that.
Yeah. He wasn't. Yeah, so that was the problem. I mean, he only had a few matches, and it was nice that they tried to do a tribute, but it showed him just like fumbling and getting disqualified, and that was pretty much it.
It would be something similar to where if you and I were just asked to go ahead and do a match, and we would have very limited training on that. But there's so many other great roles that he had. Obviously, the Friday movies were something that he did a little bit later on that were really good looks for him. He was really funny as that imposing figure in the movie, playing off Chris Tucker, Ice Cube, that whole gang that was there. And then you had his success. I think his best turn, maybe A Dark Knight, you could say it was right up there because he was brilliant in that small little segment. But The Fifth Element as the president, would be that steadying force for the entire film.
Well, The Dark Knight is funny because the rumors were he was going to be Croc. Before The Dark Knight Rises came out, and after The Dark Knight, there was that anime Gotham Knight, and it actually showed what happened to Scarecrow after Batman Begins. And yes, Croc did make an appearance, and Christopher Nolan was toying about Croc. And he said, well, should I put him in Dark Knight or, too many characters? Because I was even going to put in Firefly, and there was a Firefly figure and a Croc. But then he figured he would put him in Dark Knight Rises instead of Bane. But I guess whatever happened, the studio, fumbled, and Nolan said, I'm putting in Bane, and that was pretty much it. And it's a shame because I think the problem is because of the animated series made Croc out to be a joke. But I think that if you would have had if you would have had Tiny Lister Jr. as Croc, I think it would have worked, but it's something we'll never see. The final thing I'm going to say right now, if you want to, on Hannibal TV on YouTube, there is an hour shoot interview, and it's a really interesting. I put it up on the Facebook on the group pages. It's an interesting listen, and it does talk a lot about No Holds Barred, WCW, and life after his wrestling career. And he had a very good acting career. Sadly, from what I've heard from the autopsy, he did pass away from coronavirus at 62. So
he was actually going to be in the middle of a shoot, and he, I think, had to excuse himself because of issues going on or symptoms that were consistent with that. And it's a shame to see what this virus is doing to people all over the world in 2020. And Tiny Lister Jr., just cannot thank him enough for his contributions to pop culture. He's going to be still remembered even more because I think there's at least a dozen pictures still in production that he's going to be a part of. So you will see him in performances going forward in the next year or two. So that's at least a sign for fans that can go ahead and see some of his final work. But before we head on out, my friend, I wanted to go ahead and again pay our respects to Tommy Tiny Lister Jr., who passed away at the age of 62, and thank him for everything that he provided for us as pop culture. But before we head on out, my friend, I know you wanted to touch on some Christmas horror movies.
Yes.
Christmas horror movies is something that I think a lot of people want to go ahead and not necessarily think of, especially in the year 2020. But then again, there's that crowd that's out there that's looking for, hey, I'm looking for something a little bit different. Where will I go this holiday for horror movies?
Well, again, we talked about Krampus a few years ago, which was great. You were on that episode. You can find that in the archives. But I think it was either you or from Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast who brought up Christmas Horror Story, and I watched it. It has Krampus as well, 2 stories. It's an anthology series that just ended up on video on demand. It's from our friends in the Great White North. One of the directors, Grant Harvey, directed a few episodes of House with Huey Laurie, if you remember back in the 2000s. It's not a bad movie. I can only watch it in December, not just because it's a Christmas movie. It's just the rewatchability. I mean, it's another anthology series. I think what happened was Creepshow 3 left a bad taste in my mouth. But with this one, you have some interesting Canadian actors. You have William Shatner, who is the MC. He's a radio disc jockey that's kind of talking about things that are going on around this town. And I don't want to give too much away, but it does deal with Krampus being a weird demon, and another one where Krampus is using his powers to turn Santa's elves into zombies. And the other 2 stories do deal with possession and these little shape-shifting demons. But I have to say, it doesn't try to copy other horror movies, which is not a bad thing. And it tries to stay in touch with EC Comics, where it's short, sweet, and to the point. And there's not much irony. It's just a fun, horror-filmed horror-comedy. I was afraid it was going to try to copy the Krampus movie we saw when it came to the Krampus segment, because it does deal with a mean family, but they do kind of redeem themselves. And again, the Santa Claus fighting the elves because they've been turned into zombies because Krampus is using black magic is actually not a bad idea when done right. And since it's only a 10 to 15 minute segment, again, it almost felt like something out of College Humor. And I don't want to give away what the twist is because a lot of people haven't seen this movie. It's been out for 5 years, but I don't want to give any of the stories away. I will say this much. If you have an Amazon Prime account, it's free. And if you don't have an Amazon Prime account to rent it, I think it's $2.99 for the standard and $5.99 for the HD. But it's definitely worth at least a one-time watch. And also, the segments just don't end. They kind of like, they fade out and go into another story and then fade back in later on. Yeah. And it's kind of, it's definitely watchable.
Somebody's getting a little upset there when it concerns the little dog indeed, but no, Ian Fein has got some great thoughts there. Please check out that on Amazon Prime right now to go ahead and give you that Christmas scare that you're looking forward to this holiday. But yes, any last thoughts on the way out?
Yes, there was one other one that I came across that actually was released a couple of years ago, and that was Santa Jaws. And
I remember Santa Jaws.
Yeah, I only found out about it this year through Facebook. Somebody emailed it to me and said, "You got to discuss this," and it's on Amazon Prime for free. It's pretty much, it feels like it's copying Krampus, where it's about a kid that had a fall with his family, loses the Christmas spirit, and uses dark magic, and then regrets wishing for his family to disappear. It's not a bad movie if it was like a 10 to 15 minute College Humor mini movie, but the biggest problem is it's 90 minutes. It's a very small cast. They're definitely likable and watchable to a point, but the pacing is just blah because they have to build up to a shark that if they just go near the water, if you have anything that resembles Christmas, it will attack you. As for their carnage count, there was one interesting kill that I actually did want to give away with, where it came with, I guess, I would say an extra, where he's dressed as an elf dangling his feet in the water, and the shark will come by and bite off the guy's legs, and he's running across the pier with stumps because his legs were bit off. And I have to say, for a killer shark movie, and I know there's a lot of them out there, I have not seen them all, but I will say that this much. With that kind of because he eventually finishes the elf off, it wasn't a bad kill, And I guess with a bigger budget and the pacing just didn't get dragged out for another 5 minutes, it would have worked. But if you want to watch it one time, I think it is free on Amazon Demand. But you watch it once; it's not going to be an annual tradition. Christmas Horror Story definitely will be. Santa Jaws, just pardon the pun, does not have any bite to it.
So there you have it, everyone. Some great horror picks for this Christmas. Snuggle right around the campfire. Get right there around the TV. Pop in some horror movies to make your Yuletide bright. I can't even say that with a straight face.
I
The
know.
Yuletide bright. Make sure you get some eggnog handy because there's some scares out there for you. But once again, it's no Ian Fein from Hunnikween and the Hunnick Outcasts. My friend, I truly appreciate your thoughts on Tiny Lister. May he rest in peace, and thank him again for everything that he did for pop culture. And of course, as always, each and every year, I do appreciate your input when it comes to horror stories. Your contributions this year to Pop Culture Cosmos, many, many, many things that you've talked about, from the Yakuza video games to helping us out and sitting in the big chair, to everything that you've been a part of this year. I cannot thank you enough. And I want to wish you and your entire family the healthiest and happiest of holiday seasons, my friend.
I thank you too, sir. And yeah, I just want to end on one thing, everybody. I know that this has been the most frustrating of years, and I don't want to be repetitious. And 2021 may also be a carryover of some frustrations. And I know that where we are in different states, that they have been shut down again for a few weeks. And whenever the vaccinations are coming out, which I still have zero clue, it's kind of wonky, but let me just say this. You follow the precautions, you'll be fine. And listen, I know everybody's frustrated. It could be a lot worse. We are going to be okay. It's not as bad as one thinks. You always have somebody to talk to. You always have somebody there's always somebody out there if you need the help. Please, before you do anything drastic, just pick up a phone. If you have an available computer, talk to somebody, anybody. I promise you we'll get through this. Everything is going to be okay.
Couldn't have said that better myself. This is my good friend Noe and Fine, who I wish a fantastic holiday to. You got to catch him today at Hunnikween and the Hunnick Outcast. He's always a great part of this show, great part of what we do here, and thank him so much for being a part of the pop culture.